Tonight, the valley feels closer than ever, not because it has changed, but because you have. Through every quiet chapter before this one, through every slow step taken in patience, the wilderness has been shaping something unseen, and now that shape begins to sharpen. If you have listened from the beginning, you may sense it. The silence no longer feels uncertain, it feels deliberate. Welcome back to the Three Rivers country. If this is your first night here, you have arrived where the quiet carries meaning. You do not need to retrace every trail behind us. You do not need to remember every shadow crossed. Just listen, because the valley speaks clearly when we are calm enough to hear it. Before we continue, take one slow breath in and let it fall away gently. Let your thoughts loosen. Let your body sink deeper into stillness. There is nothing for you to solve tonight. Only the steady rhythm of the river. Only the slow certainty of what has been forming. In part 8, waiting begins to thin, not with force, not with urgency, but with clarity. What has been patient now understands its direction. And the wilderness does not hesitate when its path becomes clear. So allow the words to guide you. Allow your breathing to slow, and if sleep finds you early, that is perfectly right. Now we return to the Valley of Silent Men. Part 8, Chapter 16. Kent stood still while Maret moved in that gloom, found matches, and lighted the lamp. He had not spoken a word after the kiss. He had not taken advantage of it. The gentle pressure of her hands had restrained him from taking her in his arms, but the kiss itself fired him with a wild and glorious thrill that was like a vibrant music to which every atom of life in his body responded. If he claimed his reward at all, he had expected her kiss to be perhaps indifferent, at least neutral. What the lips she had given him there in the darkness of the room were warm, living, breathing lips. They had not been snatched away from him too quickly. Their sweetness, for an instant, had lingered. In the lamp glow, he was looking into Maret Radisson's face. He knew that his own was aflame. He had no desire to hide its confession, and he was eager to find what lay in her own eyes. And he was astonished, and then startled. The kiss had not disturbed Maret. It was as if it had never happened. She was not embarrassed, and there was no hint of color in her face. It was her deathly whiteness that startled him, a pallor emphasized by the dark masses of her hair and a strange glow in her eyes. It was not a glow brought there by the kiss. It was a sphere fading slowly out of them as he looked, until at last it was gone, and her lips trembled with an apologetic smile. He was very angry, she said. How easily some men lose their tempers, do not they, James? The little break in her voice, her brave effort to control herself, and the whimsical bitter smile that accompanied her words made him want to do what the gentle pressure of her hands had kept him from doing a few moments before, pick her up in his arms. What she was trying to hide, he saw plainly. She had been in danger, a danger greater than that which she had quietly and fearlessly faced at barracks, and she was still afraid of that menace. It was the last thing which she wanted him to know, and yet he knew it. A new force swept through him. It was the force which comes as mastery, of possessorship, of fighting grimly against odds. It rose in a mighty triumph. It told him this girl belonged to him, that she was his to fight for, and he was going to fight. Marit saw the change that came into his face. For a moment after she had spoken, there was silence between them. Outside, the storm beat in a fiercer blast. A roll of thunder crashed over the bungalow. The windows rattled in a sweep of wind and rain. Kent, looking at her, his muscles hardening, his face growing grimmer, nodded toward the window, at which Mui's signal had come. "It is a splendid night for us," he said, "and we must go." She did not answer. "In the eyes of the law, I am a murderer," he went on. "You saved me. You shot a man. In those same eyes you are a criminal. It is folly to remain here. It is sheer suicide for both of us. If Kedstai does not do what I told him to do tonight, I shall kill him," she said. The quietness of her words, the steadiness of her eyes, held him speechless. Again, it seemed to him, as it had seemed to him in his room at Cardigan's place, that it was a child who was looking at him and speaking to him. If she had shown fear a few moments before, that fear was not revealed in her face now. She was not excited. Her eyes were softly and quietly beautiful. She amazed him and discomfited him. Against that childlike sureness, he felt himself helpless. His potency was greater than his strength and greater than his determination. Placed between them instantly a vast gulf, a gulf that might be bridged by prayer and entreaty, but never by force. There was no hint of excitement in her threat against Kedsty, and yet in the very calmness of it, he felt its deadliness. A whimsical half-smile was trembling on her lips again, and a warmer glow came into her eyes. "Do you know," she said, "that according to an old and sacred code of the North, you belong to me?" "I have heard of that code," he replied. 100 years ago, I should have been your slave. If it exists today, I am happy. Yes, you see the point, James, do not you? You are about to die. Probably. I think they would have hanged you, and I saved your life. Therefore your life belongs to me, for I insist that the code still lives. You are my property, and I am going to do with you as I please until I turn you over to the rivers. And you are not going tonight. You shall wait here for Lascelles and his brigade. Lascelles? Jean Lascelles? She nodded. Yes, that is why you must wait. We have made a splendid arrangement. When Lascelles and his brigade start north, you go with them. And no one will ever know. You are safe here. No one will think of looking for you under the roof of the inspector of police. But you, Maret, he caught himself, remembering her injunction not to question her. Maret shrugged her slim shoulders, the slightest bit, and nodded for him to look upon what she knew he had already seen, her room. It is not uncomfortable, she said. I have been here for a number of weeks, and nothing has happened to me. I am quite safe. Inspector Kedsty has not looked inside that door since the day your big red-headed friend saw me down in the poplars. He has not put a foot on the stair. That is the deadline. And I know You are wondering. You are asking yourself a great many questions. Abandon, Monsieur James. You are burning up with them. I can see it. And there was something suddenly pathetic about her as she sank into the big-armed, upholstered chair which had been Ketsty's favorite reading chair. She was tired, and for a moment it seemed to Kent that she was almost ready to cry. Her ringers twisted nervously at the shining end of the braid in her lap. And more than ever, he thought how slim and helpless she was, yet how gloriously unafraid, how unconquerable, with that something within her that burned like the fire of a dynamo. The flame of that force had gone down now, as though the fire itself was dying out. But when she raised her eyes to him, looking up at him from out of the big chair, he knew that back of the yearning, childlike glow that lay in them, the heart of that fire was living and unquenchable. Again, for him, she had ceased to be a woman. It was the soul of a child that lay in her wide-open, wonderfully blue eyes. Twice before he had seen that miracle, had held him now, as it had held him at the first time when she had stood with her back at Cardigan's door. And as it had changed then, so it changed now, slowly. She was a woman again. But the yearning was still there, revealing itself to him, and yet, like the sun, infinitely remote from him. "I wish that I might answer those questions for you," she said, in a voice that was low and tired. "I should like to have you know, because I have great faith in you, James, but I cannot. It is impossible. It is inconceivable. If I did," she made a hopeless little gesture, "if I told you everything, you would not like me anymore. And I want you to like me until you go north with Monsieur Jean and his brigade. And when I do that," cried Kent, almost savagely, "I shall find this place you call the Valley of Silent Men. It takes me all my life." It was becoming a joy for him to see the sudden flashes of pleasure that leaped into her eyes. She attempted no concealment. Whatever her emotions were, they revealed themselves unaffectedly and with a simple freedom from embarrassment that swept him with an almost reverential worship, and what he had just said pleased her. Unreservedly, her glowing eyes and her partly smiling lips told him that, and she said, "I am glad you feel that way, James, and I think you would find it in time." Because her little trick of looking at him so steadily, as if there was something inside him which he was trying to see more clearly, made him feel more helplessly than ever, a slave. It was as if in those moments she forgot that he was of flesh and blood and was looking into his heart to see what was there before she gave voice to things. And then she said, still twisting her braid between her slim fingers, "You would find it, perhaps, because you are one who would not give up easily. Shall I tell you why I came to see you at Dr. Cardigan's?" It was curiosity, at first, largely that. Just why or how I was interested in the man you freed is one of the things I cannot tell you. And I cannot tell you why I came to the landing, nor can I say a word about Ketsty. It may be some day that you will know. and then you will not like me. For nearly 4 years before I saw you that day, I had been in a desolation. It was a terrible place. It ate my heart and soul out with its ugliness, its loneliness, its emptiness. A little while longer, and I would have died. Then the thing happened that brought me away. Can you guess where it was? He shook his head. No. To all the others, it was a beautiful place. Montreal. You were at school there, he guessed. Yes, the Villa Maria. I was not quite 16 then. They were kind. I think they liked me. But each night I prayed one prayer. You know what the 3 rivers are to us, to the people of the north. The Athabasca's grandmother, the Slave's mother, the Mackenzie's daughter, and over them watches always the goddess Niska, the grey goose, and my prayer was that I might go back to them. In Montreal there were people everywhere. Thousands and tens of thousands of them, so many. I was lonely and heartsick and wanted to get away, for the grey goose blood is in me, James. I loved the forests, and Niska's god does not live in Montreal. Her sun does not rise there, her moon is not the same there. The flowers are not hers, the winds tell different stories. The air is another air. People, when they look at you, look in another way, away down the 3 rivers. I had loved men. There, I was learning to hate them. Then, something happened. I came to Athabasca Landing. I went to see you because she clasped her 2 hands tightly in her lap. Because after those 4 terrible years, you were the first man I found who was playing a great big square game to the end. Do not ask me how I found it out. Please do not ask me anything. I am telling you all you can know, all you shall know. But I did find it out. And then I learned that you were not going to die. Kedsty told me that. And when I had talked with you, I knew that you would play any game square, and I made up my mind to help you. That is why I am telling you all this, just to let you know that I have faith in you, and that you must not break that faith. You must not insist on knowing more about me. You must still play the game. I am playing mine, and you must play yours. And to play yours clean, you must go with Lascelles' brigade and leave me with Kedsty. You must forget what has happened. 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 You cannot help me. You can only harm me. And if, someday, a long time from now, you should happen to find the Valley of Silent Men, he waited, his heart pounding like a fist. I may be there, she finished, in a voice so low that it was scarcely above a whisper. It seemed to him that she was looking a long way off, and it was not in his direction. And then she smiled, not at him, but in a half-hopeless little way. I think I shall be disappointed if you do not find it, she said then, and her eyes were pure as the blue flowers from which they had stolen their color as she looked at him. You know the great sulphur country beyond Fort Simpson, westward between the two Nahanis. Yes, that is where Kilbane and his patrol were lost. The Indians call it the Devil Country. Is that it? She nodded. They say no living thing has ever been through the sulphur country, she said. But that is not true. I've been through it. It is beyond the sulphur country. You must go to find the valley of silent men, straight through that gap between the north and the south Nahani. That is the way you must go if you should ever find it, James, for otherwise you would have to come down from Dawson or up from Skagway, and the country is so great that you would never come upon it in 1,000 years. The police will not find you there. You will always be safe. Perhaps I shall tell you more before the brigade comes, but that is all tonight. I may never tell you anything more. And you must not question me. Speechless he had stood, all the life of his soul burning like a fire in his eyes, as he looked at her and listened to her. And now, quietly and unexcitedly, he said, "Marette, I'm going to play this game as you want me to play it, because I love you. It is only honest for me to tell you in words what you must already know, and I am going to fight for you as long as there is a drop of blood in my body. If I go with Charlestell's brigade, will you promise me?" His voice trembled. He was repressing a mighty emotion, but not by the quiver of one of her long lashes did Marette Radisson give evidence that she had even heard his confession of love. She interrupted him before he had finished. "I can promise you nothing, no matter what you do. James, you are not like those other men I learned to hate. You will not insist? If you do, if you are like them, yes, you may go away from here tonight and not wait for Jean Lascelles. Listen, the storm will not break for hours. If you are going to demand a price for playing the game as I want you to play it, you may go. You have my permission." She was very white. She rose from the big chair and stood before him. There was no anger in her voice or gesture, but her eyes glowed like luminous stars. There was something in them which he had not seen before, and suddenly a thought struck his heart, cold as ice. With a low cry, he stretched out his hands. "My God, Marette, I am not a murderer. I did not kill John Barclay." She did not answer him. You do not believe me," he cried. "You believe that I killed Barclay, and that now, a murderer, I dare to tell you that I love you." She was trembling. It was like a little shiver running through her. For only a flash it seemed to him that he had caught a glimpse of something terrible, a thing she was hiding, a thing she was fighting. She stood there with her two little clenched hands. For in her face, in her eyes, in the beating throb of her white throat, he saw, in that moment, the almost hidden agony of a hurt thing. And then it was gone, even as he entreated again, pleading for her faith. "I did not kill John Barclay. I am not thinking of that, James," she said. It is of something." But suddenly there came a sound that rose above the monotonous tumult of it, and Marette started as if it had sent an electric shock through her. Kent, too, turned toward the window. It was the metallic tapping, which once before had warned them of approaching danger. And this time it was insistent. It was as if a voice was crying out to them from beyond the window. It was more than premonition. It was the alarm of a near and impending menace. And in that moment Kent saw Marette Radisson's hands go swiftly to her throat, and her eyes leap with sudden fire, and she gave a little cry as she listened to the sound. Chapter 17. In 10 seconds, it seemed to Kent, Marette Radisson was again the splendid creature who had held the 3 men at bay over the end of her little black gun at barracks. The sound of Mouille's second warning came at first as a shock. Accompanying it there was a moment of fear, for fear driven almost to the point of actual terror. Following it came a reaction so swift that Kent was dazed. Within those 10 seconds, the girl's slender body seemed to grow taller. A new light flamed in her face. Her eyes, turning swiftly to him, were filled with the same fire with which they had faced the 3 constables. She was unafraid. She was ready to fight. In such moments as these, it was the quiet and dispassionate composure of her voice that amazed him most. It was musical in its softness now, yet in that softness was a hidden thing. It was like velvet covering steel. She had spoken of Niska, the grey goose, the goddess of the 3 rivers, and he thought that something of the spirit of a goddess must be in Marette Radisson to give her the courage with which she faced him, even as the metallic thing outside tapped its warning again at the window. "Inspector Kedsty is coming back," she said. "I did not think he would do that tonight. He has not had time to go to barracks," said Kent. "No, possibly he has forgotten something. Before he arrives, I want to show you the nest I have made for you, James. Come quickly." It was her first intimation that he was not to remain in her room, a possibility that had already caused him some inward embarrassment. She seized a number of matches, turned down her light, and hurried into the hall. Kent followed her to the end of this hall, where she paused before a low half-door that apparently opened into some sort of a space close under the sloping roof of the bungalow. "It is an old storeroom," she whispered. "I have made it quite comfortable, I think. I have covered the window, so you may light the lamp, but you must see that no light shows under this door. Lock it on the inside, and be very quiet. For whatever you find in there, you must thank Monsieur Fingers." She pulled the door slightly open and gave him the matches. The illumination in the lower hall made its way only dimly to where they stood. In the gloom he found himself close to the soft glow of her eyes. His fingers closed about her hand as he took the matches. "Marette, you believe me?" he entreated. "You believe that I love you, that I did not kill John Barclay, that I am going to fight for you as long as God gives me breath to fight." For a moment there was silence. Her hand withdrew gently from his. "Yes, I think that I believe. Good night, James." She went from him quickly. At her door she turned. "Go in now, please," she called back softly. "If you care as you say you do, go in." She did not wait for his reply. Her own door closed behind her, and Kent, striking a match, stooped low, and entered his hiding place. In a moment he saw directly ahead of him a lamp on a box. He lighted this, and his first movement then was to close the door and turn the key that was in the lock. After that, he looked about him. The storeroom was not more than 10 feet square, and the roof was so close over his head that he could not stand upright. It was not the smallness of the place that struck him first, but the preparations which Marette had made for him. In the corner was a bed of blankets, and the rough floor of the place was carpeted with blankets, except for a 2 or 3 foot space around the edge of it. Beyond the box was a table and a chair, and it was the burden of this table that made his pulse jump quickest. Marette had not forgotten that he might grow hungry. It was laid sumptuously, with a plate for 1, but with food for half a dozen. There were a brace of roasted grouse, brown as nuts, a cold roast of moose meat or beef, a dish piled high with golden potato salad, olives, pickles, an open can of cherries, bread, butter, cheese. And then he noticed what was on the chair: a belt and holster and a Colt automatic 45. Marette had not figured on securing a gun in the affair at barracks, and her foresight had not forgotten a weapon. She had placed it conspicuously where he could not fail to see it at once, and just beyond the chair, on the floor, was a shoulder pack. It was of the regulation service sort, partly filled. Resting against the pack was a Winchester. He recognized the gun. He had seen it hanging in Dirty Fingers' shack. For a matter of 5 minutes, he scarcely moved from where he stood beside the table. Nothing but an unplastered roof was between him and the storm, and over his head the thunder crashed, and the rain beat in torrents. He saw where the window was, carefully covered with a blanket. Even through the blanket he caught faintly the illumination of lightning. This window overlooked the entrance to Kedsty's bungalow, and the idea came to him of turning out the light and opening it. In darkness, he took down the blanket, but the window itself was not movable, and after assuring himself of this fact, he flattened his face against it, peering out into the chaos of the night. In that instant came a flare of lightning, and to Kent, looking down, was revealed a sight that tightened every muscle in his body. More vividly than if it had been day, he saw a man standing below in the deluge. It was not Mui, it was not Kedsty, it was no one that he had ever seen. Even more like a ghost than a man was that apparition of the lightning flare. A great gaunt giant for ghost, hair-headed, with long dripping hair and a long storm-twisted beard. The picture shot to his brain with the swiftness of the lightning itself. It was like the sudden throwing of a cinema picture on a screen. Then blackness shut it out. Kent stared harder. He waited. Again came the lightning, and again he saw that tragic ghost-like figure waiting in the storm. 3 times he saw it, and he knew that the mysterious bearded giant was an old man. The 4th time the lightning came, the figure was gone, and in that flare it was the bowed figure of Kedsty he saw, hurrying up the gravel path to the door. Quickly Kent covered the window but he did not relight the lamp. Before Kedsty could have reached the foot of the stair, he had unlocked the door. Cautiously, he opened it 3 or 4 inches and sat down with his back against the wall, listening. He heard Kedsty pass through into the big room where Marette had waited for him a short time before. After that, there was silence, except for the tumult. After an hour, Kent listened. In all that time, he did not hear a sound from the lower hall or from Marette's room. He wondered if she was sleeping and if Kedsty had gone to bed, waiting for morning before he set in action his bloodhounds for the law. Kent had no intention of disturbing the comfortable-looking bed of blankets. He was not only sleepless, but filled with the premonition of events about to happen. He felt impinging itself more and more upon him, a sense of watchfulness, that Inspector Kedsty and Marette Radisson were under the same roof, and that there was some potent and mysterious reason which kept Kedsty from betraying the girl's presence, was the thought which troubled him most. He was not developing further the plans for his own escape. He was thinking of Marette. What was her power over Kedsty? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that Kedsty would like to see her dead? Why was it that again and again he asked himself the questions and found no answers to them. And yet, even in this purgatory of mystery that environed him, he felt himself happier than he had ever been in his life. For Marette was not 400 or 500 miles down the river. She was in the same house with him, and he had told her that he loved her. He was glad that he had been given courage to let her know that. He relighted the lamp and opened his watch, placed it on the table, where frequently he could look at the time. He wanted to smoke his pipe, but the odor of tobacco, he was sure, would reach Kedsty unless the inspector had actually retired into his bedroom for the night. Half a dozen times he questioned himself as to the identity of the ghostly apparition he had seen in the lightning flare of the storm. Perhaps it was someone of Finger's strange friends from out of the wilderness, Moui's partner in watching the bungalow. The picture of that giant of a man, with his great beard and long hair, as his eyes had caught him in a sea of electrical fire, was indelibly burned into his brain. It was a tragic picture. Again he put out the light and bared the blanketed window, but he saw nothing but the sodden gleam of the earth when the lightning flashed. A second time he opened the door a few inches and sat down with his back to the wall, listening. How long it was before drowsiness stole upon him he did not know, but it came, and for a few moments at a time as his eyes closed. It robbed him of his caution, and then, for a space, he slept. A sound brought him suddenly into wide wakefulness. His first impression was that the sound had been a cry. For a moment or two, as his senses adjusted themselves, He was not sure. Then swiftly the thing grew upon him. He rose to his feet and widened the crack of his door. A bar of light shot across the upper hall. It was from Moret's room. He had taken off his boots to deaden the sound of his feet, and he stepped outside his door. He was positive he heard a low cry, a choking, sobbing cry, only barely audible, and that it came from down the stair. No longer hesitating, he moved quickly to Moret's room and looked in. His first glimpse was of the bed. It had not been used. The room was empty. Something cold and chilling gripped at his heart, and an impulse which he no longer made an effort to resist pulled him to the head of the stair. It was more than an impulse. It was a demand. Step by step he went down, his hand on the butt of his coat. He reached the lower hall, which was still lighted, and a step or two brought him to a view of the door that opened into the big living room beyond. That door was partly open, and the room itself was filled with light. Soundlessly Kent approached. He looked in. What he saw first brought him relief together with shock. At one end of the long desk table which hung a great brass lamp stood Moret, Chasme profile to him. He could not see her face. Her hair fell loose about her, glowing like a rich sable cape in the light of the lamp. She was safe, alive, and yet the attitude of her as she looked down was the thing that gave him shock. He was compelled to move a few inches more before he could see what she was staring at, and then his heart stopped dead still. Huddled down in his chair, with his head flung back, so that the terrible ghastliness of his face fronted Kent, was Kedsty, and Kent, in an instant, knew only a dead man could look like that. With a cry he entered the room. Moret did not start, but an answering cry came into her throat, as she turned her eyes from Kedsty to him. To Kent, it was like looking upon the dead in two ways. Moret Radisson, living and breathing, whiter than Kedsty, was white, with the unbreathing pallor of the actually dead. She did not speak. She made no sound after that answering cry in her throat. She simply looked. Kent spoke her name gently as he saw her great, wide eyes blazing dully, their agony and despair. Then, like one stunned and fascinated, she stared down upon Kedsty again. Every instinct of the manhunter became alive in Kent's brain as he too turned toward the inspector of police. Kedsty's arms hung limp over the side of his chair. On the floor under his right hand was his Colt automatic. His head was strained so far over the back of the chair that it looked as though his neck had been broken. On his forehead, close up against his short-cropped, iron-grey hair, was a red stain. Kent approached and bent over him. He had seen death too many times not to recognize it now, but seldom had he seen a face twisted and distorted as Kedsty's was. His eyes were open, bulging in a glassy stare. His jaws hung loose. Afterward, he had been choked to death, and the thing that had choked him was a tress of woman's hair. In the seconds that followed that discovery, Kent could not have moved if his own life had paid the penalty of inaction, for the story was told there about Kedsty's throat and on his chest. The tress of hair was long and soft and shining and black, Twist twice round Catsty's neck. The loose end rippled down over his shoulder, key lacking like. It was that thought of velvety sable that had come to him at the doorway, looking at Maret. It was the thought that came to him now. He touched it. He took it in his fingers. He unwound it from about Catsty's neck, where it had made two deep rings in the flesh. From his fingers, it rippled out full length. And he turned slowly and faced Marette Radisson. Never had human eyes looked at him as she was looking at him now. She reached out a hand, her lips mute, and Kent gave her the tress of hair. And the next instant she turned, with a hand clasped at her own throat, and passed through the door. After that, he heard her going unsteadily up the stairs. Chapter 18. Kent did not move. His senses for a space were stunned. He was almost physically insensible to all emotions but that one of shock and horror. He was staring at Catsty's grey-white twisted face when he heard Marette's door close. A cry came from his lips, but he did not hear it. Was unconscious that he had made a sound. His body shook with a sudden tremor. He could not disbelieve, for the evidence was there. From behind, as he had sat in his chair, Marette Radisson had struck the inspector of police with some blunt object. The blow had stunned him, and after that, and now, the valley rests again. But this rest feels temporary, not uneasy, not restless, temporary. What has unfolded tonight has brought everything closer to its edge, not the edge of chaos, the edge of completion. If you are still awake, notice the steadiness in the silence. The uncertainty that once lingered has almost disappeared. What remains is direction. The wilderness no longer watches. It prepares, and in the next part, preparation becomes action, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty that has guided this story from the beginning. The final movement draws near. The last unanswered space is narrowing. And when silence narrows, truth has nowhere left to hide. But not tonight. Tonight, you release that tension. Let it drift like mist over dark water. There is nothing you must anticipate, nothing you must predict. The valley will finish what it has begun. When you are ready to return, Part 9 will be waiting, and the quiet certainty will become something even deeper. For now, breathe slowly. Let your body grow heavy. Let the wilderness fade into dream. Sleep peacefully.